Hey everyone, this is Nephis here. In this video, I'm going to unveil a plan I have been working on for the past 2 years, which I've been referring to as the raiding project for those of you who've been hanging out with me in either my streams or Discord server lately, which we've now officially named Project Vitality. This is something I've always wanted to do, but couldn't do it due to the time constraints. But now that I am a full-time content creator, it's time to do this. Over 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to become a Twitch partner so that I could create the hard mode stream team to promote content creators and streamers going through not just veteran trials but the hardest content possible in PvE. Almost 3 years ago, the only ESO Twitch directory streamers that were doing PvE endgame content in the form of trials were just myself and another endgamer. That was it. After the hard mode stream team started gaining traction, it became much more commonplace over time to see people start streaming trial content, and as the PvP demographic started to die out as well, we also picked up streamers showcasing endgame PvP. What I observed though that occurred in the Twitch directory was quite fascinating to me, with more and more of the viewership becoming more and more interested in trials, and actually engaging and exploring into trials content to the point that even a few other content creators also started doing trials more frequently on streams, and that's kind of led to a little mini boom on the content creation side, which in turn affects the viewership's interest. Today, it's not so rare in fact to see a player or content creator streaming their raids from score pushing to simple progression, and I feel like this is a part due to a few factors, including a clear shift in demographic preference, promotion, and of course the increase in the accessibility to both information and trial groups over time. I thought back then as we worked on ESO University's website and Discord server, how we could replicate something like that on a more massive scale beyond the realm of entertainment. We started testing the waters with ESOU as a place without a paywall where anyone could come ask any question they'd like and get answers. In fact, thousands of you have come to ESOU, something I'm extremely grateful for, and you have asked literally thousands of questions, many of which are now on the website for all players to see even without joining Discord. Some of you got into raiding, some of you didn't. But this wasn't enough for me, so we started hosting classes which were both an educational gift and social relief during the height of the COVID pandemic. We had ESO endgame players who volunteered as the faculty teach people through video chats how to heal, how to tank, how to DPS, how to play as what class, and more. We started promoting other non-combat things such as housing, fashion, add-on development. We still try to do all of this, but as time went on, I felt that something beyond an ESO Google was needed on the social plane, and then as the many different personalities, beliefs, and experiences of almost 18,000 ESO players clashed or melded from all the platforms and servers, I started formulating in my mind of a future where anyone from everywhere could start raiding and learning, regardless of their level of experience or gear. I love raiding. To me, it's not a matter of purely content. If it was, I would have left ESO a long time ago. For me, it's a lot to do with the people I raid with. Sometimes it's about helping people get their first clears, more than it is about getting the world record. Sometimes it's just about having fun. I want more people to realize this, that raiding, and by extension raiders, are not all that bad, nor are this something that you can never get involved in unless you're 1900 CP or, you got a gold perfected year. I don't know anyone watching this video, but I goddamn hate these nonsensical requirements or barriers of entry that unfortunately a significant portion of groups tend to place, and one of the goals of Project Vitality is to lower the actual barriers of entry to start your raiding journey, and to change the perception of these barriers as well. For the past 2 years, over 2,000 people have filled out an optional ESOU questionnaire, and on these questionnaires was a question: are you a raid lead or a guild master? If people had said yes, I reached out to them, asked if they were interested in the project, and went from there. It took me several days up until today to finish. In the end, I think we have about 60 people who can help the initial push of the project. Vitality is going to address a multitude of issues that face the raiding community in different places, and as a forward, the system I'm going to present is by far from a perfect solution at the moment, but it will be a constantly evolving system to adapt to the benefit of as many people as possible on every platform and server. I also acknowledge that the chance of failure is incredibly high with what I'm going to talk about. I estimate about 2 years for me to see if Project Vitality succeeded or not. This project will also try to solve a lot of complex problems that may or may not be interacting with one another at the same time. A lot of you will probably laugh at some of my ideas, dismiss or question the project as pointless, offer help but not help, and so on, and that's okay. I fully accept the reality of this, but we'll try anyway because I think there is still a small chance of succeeding. If it succeeds, well, a lot of us are going to win. First, I want to talk about the rating system. The current plan is to create an environment with ESOU as the foundation. Not only will this environment perform a role where your guys can freely learn, ask questions, or share information, but it will also be a place where you actually engage with others and start raiding with one another. The intent of this plan is to bring in more players than ever before on a scale never seen before with any single guild or a single platform and server. I'm thinking, in my mind, dozens of raids every day. Thousands of raiders participating every week, traveling through your discords, making teams, picking up groups, teaching others, socializing, and just doing some fun runs. How do we start this? Again, we have to lower the barriers of entry that I mentioned earlier. Some places want 90k DPS for you to do VishyRF with them, or certain sets are required, but they're unobtainable for the average tank or maybe the average healer. Maybe they just couldn't farm it. Some places go lower on this minimum requirement. On a past ESOU podcast with Benzar, the owner of ESO Runs, he prescribed 60k DPS as one of the standards, fairly low in relative comparison to the endgame parses. However, in ESOU, I believe something like as shown on the screen is more than feasible, or even enough to encourage newer players in actually raiding and starting to learn raiding. Certain things also, like posting parses or in videos, I think that a lot of people don't realize is that they're a huge turnoff to newer players. So for the purpose of this ESOU rating system is to not just lower the number more, but also not require anything like DPS parses or achievement clears really. And also we're not going to require too many support sets just yet, depending on the content, while also making sure those who raid these basic trials are patient, kind, and knowledgeable. This part of the system, for the Craglorns, Craglorn hard modes, and VMO hard modes, clears will be mandatory for all players except the raid leads. I strongly think that there must be a huge emphasis on this part of the system, as there are so many people who think they're above this content and never do it, but clearly to me, most of you don't know how to do it, optimized or unoptimized, and end up on the floor, as evident by the recent open runs I've done, or the past open raids I've done on PC North America, PC Europe, and Xbox North America. In order to facilitate an easy transition for newer raiders, they need these stepping stones rather than leaping immediately into a Vet Sunspire or Vet Dreadsail Reef. The problem is, of course, the pool of players available or willing to do this older content with newer players, and the main incentive system is actually that once you get your so-called clears in ESOU, you're more than free to join any open raid of any level that has a lower than average minimum requirement set by the system or the raid lead. And these open runs can include things like Pug Griffin Hearts, open Godslayer runs, or open Asylum Sanctorium hard mode farm runs that I'm sure many of you will enjoy, and more. It is also painfully obvious that the current raiding climate is of sheer impatience with either newer players or people who are still learning at a mid-tier level, which often leads to roster burnouts or simply replacing these people with more experienced players in specific roles, prominently tanks. Yet this leads to the later issue of raid guilds or endgame progression teams either cannibalizing each other to maintain their own rosters or needing to always be in dire need of specific roles or amounts of players. It's very clear that the endgame progression raider is not the future, but simply a part of the future. This part of Project Vitality is to expand the base pool raiders enough to the point that as players progress through both the mandatory and open raids in the SOU, they can start improving themselves while exploring other raid guilds and options. An example of this, as shown on the screen, where raid leading representatives from these example guilds are hosting one raid a week each or something like that, and everyone can see who they are and where they're from. If they join these open runs and they like your raid lead or the runs, they can see if they'd like to join your guild or server for a good time. This is a bigger scale of my cross-pollination method of raiders. I've experimented with great success on PCNA with multiple guilds and groups, which has seen across the board growth in both a number of raid leads and raiders. Another aspect to the system is that I'll be approaching every other raid lead, raid team, and guild that I know who can give one of themselves to host one run a week or maybe every 2 weeks depending on their life schedule, to have their own channel which can double as a recruitment post or an advertisement post where you organize the raids under your guild's name or maybe your brand's name if you're a streamer who likes to host raids. I would also like to offer in particular endgame progression guilds other benefits as well that I will cover in a later time. The main thing for this system, however, is that everyone should be having fun while learning their raids, and if you can get enough of these runs, people will naturally flock to where they are. The numbers, and I've shown that thus far, is not really indicative of anything final, as I said before, but it is to demonstrate that yes, you don't need to be the best or work on the dummy for 100k DPS. Things like self-improvement, people working with each other, should be the norm. But we also need to work towards a culture where that can be incubated. There's so much more that we can do apart from pointing someone towards a YouTube build video or whatever, then that's it. And to also have a way of avoiding burning out if you invest too much into people who may, inevitably leave or move on. One of my goals is to find a midway point through this system for both the raid leads and raiders on this issue. The raid system will also be reinforced by ESOU, starting its classes back up by the ESOU professors, which will also require more in-game volunteers in the future, but this will be everything will be supplementing one another, the classes and the raids, and even perhaps other gatherings. Some detractors will probably ask why we should spend so much time on ESO when the devs apparently don't care about us. And this is the same thing I said to the real Godzilla on a previous ESOU podcast. Control what you can control, and then see what happens, basically. ZOS may not give you what you want now, but if more players are attracted to what you're doing, or your community and join in, you should nurture that. The first goal then of this project is to introduce a significant shift in the demographic of the ESO player base. This kind of relates back to that related story of the Twitch director at the start of this video, because as you can see, it's very possible to shift the interest of a large portion of the player base. And then it results on the dev end and business end, you'll need to examine those interests. They have their own metrics, and then they can see if they can improve on those interests. This then leads to a potential resolution of things like that lack of attention a lot of endgame PvPers feel, and also the lack of a reward structure, not just in trials or other endgame content, but also within the entire game in other systems. This shift can happen, as this has happened before, with the shift from a PvP-centric game direction to a casual-centric game direction due to the shift. Endgame players have always bemoaned that we're the minority, they don't care about us, don't try anything too new, and then it's rinse and repeat. If you can open up more raids, which is basically a foundational idea behind this, if you can present a raiding culture that people can go with, you'll see the shift I'm talking of. This brings me to the cementation of a raiding culture. Per my conversations with the real Godzilla, I argued that a huge part of why the PvP community often gets demonized, targeted, or even immediately not given a chance within the greater ESO community is that the PvP community has no non-persona based community, nor a tolerable platform where everyone can get together without harassment or childish nonsense accompanying them. It was the same for the PvE and game community years ago, and in some cases for a reason. I feel like with ESOU and a lot of the guilds that I know, we've come a long way as individuals and groups of people where the stereotype of the toxic elitist raider has started to diminish. But I feel like we can complete one more step, and that's kind of defining what raiding culture is or what endgame culture is. I believe we can create a strong, positive culture without the needless drama or anything. Oh, and yes, I absolutely know there will be drama at one point or another. I think that's just unfortunately unavoidable. But the main focus should always be on having our doors open for anyone who wants to try raiding, who wants to get into raiding, while sustaining ourselves as a community rather than trying the same thing over and over. I think a lot of people these days are just too focused on certain concepts and ideas that has kind of led to some of their situations in the first place. I think with more engagement through raids, and of course by word of mouth, this is certainly possible to where we can finally have a standard answer to things like, the basic etiquette on when to let your raid lead know you can come to raid, or even addressing toxic behavior. Obviously, something like this will ruffle some feathers on specific platforms and servers, but generally I don't care, nor should you care about the people who can make raiding a toxic environment. And you know what, I will say it, there's been some cases where some things did get really unpleasant with some raiders where there was, harassment or sexual harassment and, skin for skin bullshit. And the goal here is to make it so that everyone is unified in some set of attitudes or beliefs for raiding to prevent any of that in the future within the community. And in order to help with this, I do plan on adding like an anonymous feedback channel for people to share about their experiences, if they had any with specific raiders and raids in ESOU, if it's like if offending behaviors and things like that, for a moderator team to act on under ESOU's Discord partner guidelines of the ESO Terms of Service, which will directly work with the raiders and their raid leads through the support network I mentioned earlier. How do you participate? First, join the ESO University Discord, link below in the video description. Go to the role signups channel at the very top, assign yourself the appropriate role like PC NA Raider or Xbox EU Raider, and they get pinged on that role for raids and have fun. That's it. If you want to raid lead in ESOU and help with Project Vitality, please do let me know in Discord PMs at NefusQS #4444. Anyway, Project Vitality is going to be our biggest project and probably most difficult ever, bigger than ESOU in many ways, and I do thank you guys for sticking with me, ESOU, the endgame content creators, the class reps, and more thus far, and I look forward to your support. Thanks again for Nefus and chilling, stay safe, and see you guys next time.